Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're really happy to have with us today Mark Astor. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Zane, good to see you and thank you for having me on.
So, Mark grew up in the UK, came to America for college, spent 5 years prosecuting felons, including capital murder cases for Palm Beach County, and then walked away from it all to become the attorney Florida families call at 2 a.m. when a loved one is disappearing into addiction. But there's more to that story. It wasn't just a direct um, linear thing from one thing to another. So tell me about how you got there, Mark.
Yeah, so Zane, first of all, thank you for having me on as a guest. So I started my legal career in the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office in 1994. I'd been an intern in 93 and between my second and third years of law school and tried about a dozen jury trials. I knew 5 minutes into my first real case that this is where I was supposed to be, which was good because I didn't really have a passion for the law. I wasn't a particularly good law student. I got by. Okay. I tell people I was in the top half of the class, which means I wasn't far from the bottom half either. So, I spent 5 years trying
It's funny
cases
though.
and
I just want to interject here. It's funny that I talked to a lot of lawyers, and it seems like some of the most successful lawyers were not in the top half of the class, or not in the top bit. Anyway, that's a side thing.
well, it's
Aside,
interesting to
go
say
ahead.
because I used to come say if I had class at 9 in the morning, I'd come in and there'd be, one or two people there. They'd been there since 8. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Oh, I had to pull the latest case. And I'm like, who cares about the latest case? I just want to pass the damn class. The latest case. I'll read that when I'm in practice and getting paid. You know what I mean? I'm not reading that shit for free. So I wasn't real passionate about the law. But then when I got into the courtroom as an intern, I was allowed to try cases. All of that stuff started to make sense. Criminal procedure, the rules of evidence, trial advocacy, rules of professional responsibility. I'm like, oh, that's what we learned that stuff for. And all of a sudden, I was like, wow, this stuff's powerful if you figure out how to use it. And I love trying cases. And I spent, as you said, 5 years there. But after 5 years and trying 200 jury trials, I was pretty fried. I mean, the last year and a half
Wow,
where
that's
I
a
was in a
lot.
felony trial unit, it's a lot of trials in a very small time. I mean, the last 18 months I was in the office when I was in a felony trial unit, I was in trial every single week, trying either a first degree or a second degree felony. So that meant I was working late at night, I was working on weekends, and I loved it because I enjoyed trying cases. But after that, after 5 years, I was done. I was just fried, and I wish I had stayed a little bit longer. But ultimately, I left. I ended up working for a family business as general counsel, but I also did some defense work, which, to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't enjoy it at all. It paid a lot more. I had all the material things a single guy could want, and I was completely miserable. And I also got married at 34, and I got divorced at 35, and I'm 59 now, and my life was in turmoil. I just couldn't find any purpose at all. I was completely miserable. I ended up taking a year off after I got divorced, spent a year in DC, went back, got my LLM at American University, and I also worked on a presidential campaign, which I was passionate about. But the candidate I worked for lost, so no government job for Mark. Definitely no job for Mark working in the White House. So I came back. I spent 3 or 4 more years back in Florida, again doing what I was doing to pay my bills, and then in 2010 I went to California for 3 years, uh, basically with whatever I had left off the '08 crash, which really hurt me. And I spent 3 years there enjoying the single life, exercising, um, enjoying all the beautiful women in Southern California, and failing the California bar exam twice. Anyway, after 3 years there, I ran out of money. I came home. I took one more shot at the bar exam. I studied actually here at a local library here in Boca, where I live. Flew back, took the bar exam, came back, found out I'd gotten within a percentage point, but still failed it. And, friends and family were saying, you're not supposed to be in California. You should be here in Florida. And of course, I think I studied for all of about 3 weeks for the Florida bar because the first month out of law school, I was working at the state attorney's office. And then I'm going to class at night. And then I took 3 weeks off, studied full time, crammed, and passed it. And so my ego was somewhat bruised. And then I met somebody that completely changed the direction of my life. So I got invited to a breakfast meeting to hear R. John Robbins speak. I don't know if you know who R. John Robbins is. R. John Robbins
Nope.
is the founder of How to Manage a Small Law Firm. And what How to Manage a Small Law Firm does is they teach lawyers the one thing that we do not learn in law school, at any law school, anywhere in this country, and that is the business side of running a law firm. Not practicing
Isn't that
law,
funny?
running the
Because
business.
because every lawyer, if you're not working for some sort of governmental entity, you are running a business.
Well, or you have a business that you work for and the business doesn't work for you.
Right.
In other words,
Yeah.
you just created a job. That's all you really did. And I got invited to a breakfast meeting. It was 7:30 down in the Gables, which is about 3 hours from me. So I got up at the arse crack of dawn to get down there. And he spoke to a room of about 20 lawyers, and just really talked to them about the business side of running a law firm. And it completely resonated with me because I came from an entrepreneurial background. My dad had left school at 14. My mum had left school at 16. So I did not come from an educated background. My father built businesses. Some worked, some didn't. Some made money, and some of them crushed him. Um, so when he started talking about business, I'm like, well, that's not. I could be a lawyer and have a business. Okay, that I have to find out more about. And what's happened is after he got done talking, I begged him for a job, and he hired me. And I spent a year working for him, learning about the business of running a law firm. And after a year, I said, okay, I'm ready to do this. And when I sat down, I thought about who I wanted to help because part of what How to Manage does is really focusing on who do you want to help. And you see, I learned two very important things there when I was there, Zane. Number one, and this was why I was miserable, by the way, because I had been really miserable, and I tried desperately not to practice law. Number one, you got to take 100% responsibility for your life, both personally and professionally. And number two, you got to find some people that need your help. And so when I sat down and figured out who I could help, I was like, well, I got some close friends and definitely family members who have these issues, behavioral health issues. And I looked online and there was absolutely nobody helping them. There were two lawyers who were dabbling in this stuff and they had a bit of a monopoly on this and they kept it quiet because they were making too much money. One of them actually tried to shut me down because he was so ticked off at what I did. Um, and so in February of 2016, with no money, flat broke, I sat down in the same library that I'd studied for the California bar exam in, and the library see had free Wi-Fi and a little cafeteria with their cheap coffee. And I just started to call people, and I would go and have coffee with people. I'd have lunch appointments with people. I had really cheap business cards made at Vistaprint, and I ran around to different treatment centers and handed out my business card because I hadn't even lived in Florida in 3 years. I hadn't practiced law in close to five, and nobody knew who the hell I was. They're like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "I'm the guy. I'm here to help people." And it took 14 months before I got my first behavioral health case. Meantime, I took criminal cases. I took family law cases, which I co-counseled with a friend from law school because I knew nothing about family law. And actually, the very first case I got was a student athlete who got himself in a bit of hot water with a female student, and that was referred to me by a good friend of mine. And at the time, I thought it was a big fee, but by the time it was all said and done, I spent all the money on gas and hotels. But I did save the kid's scholarship, so it was a win-win. And I finally, by the end of 16, I had enough money to get a small office. And 11 months after I opened up the office, my father unexpectedly passed away. So it was a really crappy time for me. And I had to scramble to find the money to pay for his funeral. So it wasn't a good time. But I was, the one thing I have spades of is grit. I have grit and determination. And I don't walk away from a fight. And I said, I'm doing this and I don't care what it takes. And so by the end of 16, I had a small office. In 17, I met my now wife. And really, for the next 6 years, it was just us doing everything: sales, marketing, meeting with clients, drafting pleadings, running to court. I mean, whatever it took, we did it. And it really was us until about 3 years ago when we finally started to hire staff, an intake person, an associate. And we're now a team of about 15 people, which is good because now I can sit here and have a conversation with you without the phone blowing up too much. I mean, it still rings, but there was a time, Zane, when it didn't ring. And I used to say, holy shit, how am I going to pay the rent? And then it got to the point where the phone didn't stop ringing. I'm like, if I don't hire an intake person, I'm going to pull what's left of my hair out of my head. So it's been a journey, but we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. But it has been a grind, and I still work at least 6 days a week. I'm passionate about helping people. I'm passionate about the work that we do, and I love running my business. So
So
one
I
of
want
the
to talk about the work you do. So because it's
Oh, wow.
unusual. I
I
mean,
was, you
I
wanted the digest. That's the region. That's the Cliff Note version. 10 years
yeah,
ago.
just so in case anybody's watching, we started out and I said, okay, give me the compressed version, but the compressed version still had carried a lot of ground. So tell me about your current practice. So you help people. Your work is all around the Marchman Act and the Baker Act, or um, from both sides, and people don't even know what the hell those are. Maybe some people know what the Baker Act is. Most people don't know what the Marchman is. It called the Marchman Act or the Marchman Law or just the Marchman?
Yeah. So yeah, just to backtrack a little bit, Zane. So the mission of the firm, and it's obviously changed a little bit since day one, but the mission of the firm is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. So we're taking calls from families, typically mums and dads, from all over the country. I would tell you that the bulk of our clients are not here in Florida. They're somewhere. I mean, we get calls from as far west as where you are in the Northeast Corridor, Oregon, California, Hawaii, New York, New Jersey, that area, and occasionally, outside of the country. And it's because somebody in the family has a long history of drug use, mental illness, treatment that doesn't work, if they'll even go. They're probably med non-compliant, probably been a guest of the state through either the criminal or mental health systems, and maybe even an overdose. And they call us to fix that. So obviously, as lawyers, one of the things we're doing is providing legal services. And there are three statutes, as you correctly pointed out, that we operate under: Marchman Act, Guardianship, and the Baker Act. And depending on the case, could be all three at the same time. So things can get hectic, and understanding how these systems all work together, and sometimes people get arrested. Now, I don't take the criminal cases, I refer them out. But again, understanding how the criminal arena merges and can cross over into our world is very important, because if you're a one-trick pony and only do Marchman Acts, right, and your client gets it and the respondent gets arrested, now what are you going to do? Tell the parents you can't help them? So understanding how those universes work is what really is the key piece of this, and from the legal component. So
So
we're providing. Mhm.
talk about the differences between. So I mean, you are actually will work on the Marchman Act from the perspective of both sides. Of someone as
I will.
or detained and held against their will unfairly, and on the other side, when you need to detain and hold someone against their will because they're destructive, they're destroying themselves. So talk about that concept because it's all like. So how long is it? I want to dive into the details. So let's say my son is in Florida in rehab. He just called me and says, "I'm walking out. What do I do in the next hour?"
Yeah, I mean, if there's obviously we have evidence to prove there's a substance use disorder, it sounds like the Marchman Act is the appropriate way to go. Now, one of the neat things about the Marchman Act is it can be initiated on an ex parte emergency basis, and depending on the county, normally that's a same day process. I mean, I've had them granted within 2 or 3 hours of filing. So, I mean, it takes 2 or 3 hours just to put the paper together, and then you file the case and you get a court order, which mandates either that law enforcement go and get him and take him somewhere to a receiving facility, or it says you got to stay where you are. And if you don't, then obviously there are going to be some sanctions potentially imposed on you for violating the court order. So Marshall is a pretty powerful tool in that respect. So it's for primary substance use disorders.
So the Baker Act. So how does it now? The Marchman Act is only effective in Florida, as I understand it. Is that correct? But you
Well,
can somehow reach out
for
with that, or
notify.
how does that work?
Well, so the jurisdiction of the court is based on location. So it's not unusual for us. In fact, it's very typical of us for somebody to be coming to Florida, or they're already here in Florida. And sometimes getting them here can be, I got to wave my magic wand, that I won't go into that because, well, that's what makes me better than everybody else, right? Is getting them here. So, right, jurisdiction is based on your location. And obviously, there are some counties in Florida that are better at this than others. I might want them in one particular county because I know the judges are more switched on. The cops do a better job. It'll get done faster. I'll get a better assessment. I mean, those types of things are important things to know. And you only know that if you've handled these cases all over the state and you know which counties do a lousy job with it. In which case, maybe there's a different form of relief that we're going to plead. Maybe it's a guardianship case, right? Which, frankly, is a lot broader in its relief than a Marchman Act. It's not quite as quick, for the most part, and I don't want to get complicated here, but there's an ex parte piece to the guardianship too. But we only use it very rarely because it's extraordinary relief, and the courts don't like doing ex parte on for guardianship. They'll do it for Marchman, but they're not so keen to do it for a guardianship. So you better have somebody, there better be some imminent risk to either person or property that requires the court to grant you extraordinary relief.
So, how does the Baker Act play into this whole thing?
Yeah, so the Baker Act, and pretty much every state has a version of the Baker Act. That is a statute that allows the state to step in and basically grab somebody and take them into a custodial type setting when there's an allegation that because of a mental illness, i.e., they're suicidal or maybe even homicidal, right? And it's an imminent threat. So someone's threatening to harm themselves. Maybe somebody took too much medication, with an intent to self harm, or they told somebody they were going to kill themselves, things like that. But it allows the state to step in. And the problem with it is that once the state steps in and you are placed in a receiving facility, unlike a criminal case, nobody actually knows you're there. In other words, there's no oversight. Even if a judge is the one who initiates the detention period of 72 hours, there's no oversight. That judge never sees the case again unless one or two things happen. Either I come along and drag the facility, the state, back into court, or the state, the facility, files to keep the person for an extended period of detention. Now due process starts to, come into the picture. But it's very easy for these facilities to circumvent the due process requirements of the Baker Act. Plus, because they are an agent of the state, albeit a privately licensed agent of the state for profit, as an agent of the state, they enjoy sovereign immunity. So as a general rule, you can't sue them for this stuff, even if they get it wrong and do so intentionally. So they're very motivated, especially if there's health insurance, to want to keep somebody and violate rights because there's no accountability. So I do a lot of that, and just
So,
the
can
rules.
you describe?
Well,
Uh,
let me tell you why I do this work, Zane. Why the Baker Act has
yep.
become a mission of mine, and why I'm pretty confident in telling you I file more habeas petitions than any other lawyer in the entire state. Because when I told you I lost my dad 11 months in,
Hmm.
unexpectedly, 2 days after I buried him, I had a family member that was Baker Acted, and I was there when it happened. Okay, so I know what it feels like. And then during COVID, other lawyers started to call me because their clients were getting Baker Acted, and nobody knew what to do with these cases. And everybody kept telling these lawyers, there's nothing you can do. Well, I don't believe that. I'm a lawyer, and as lawyers, we live in the gray. So find the gray, and that's where we operate. And so I just started filing all these cases, and the facility said, who the hell's this guy? We're not going to put up with this. And they started to fight me. So for the first 6 to 9 months, I was running all over the state litigating these cases. Well, they got tired of having their doctors kicked all over the courtroom, and they decided maybe we don't want to deal with this guy. So these days, very few cases get litigated, but when they do, they know what's coming down the pipe. So, I probably file anywhere from 250 to 300 habeas petitions every single year. I've always got two or three habeas petitions pending somewhere in the state. It's become a real mission of mine, Zane. So, I'll happily represent people because the
So,
state.
describe to me one of the more egregious cases, because usually it's more effective to be able to understand if you take us down a single journey.
Yeah, I'll give you two examples. The first was a mum and daughter. So mum is living in Minnesota. Adult daughter lives down here in Florida, and mum and daughter have somewhat of an adversarial, contentious relationship. And in the middle of the conversation, the daughter said to the mother, "What do you want from me? Shall I take a knife? I'll cut my throat. Will that make you happy?" The mother hung up the phone. She called down from Minnesota to Florida and said, can you send two officers around there right now? My daughter's about to slit her throat. She's going to take a knife and slit her throat. Cops show up and they said, "Did you say this?" She said, "Yeah, I said it. I said it in jest with my mother." They're like, "Let's go." They handcuffed her, put her hands behind her back, and took her to a Baker facility. And then somebody from the family called us and said, they're holding her. We can't get her out. They won't even talk to us. So that was one crazy example. Another example was where I had an elderly gentleman and his wife was having mental health issues, and law enforcement had been called to the scene of the house, right, because he didn't know what to do with her. And one day when he made that phone call, some very nice officers showed up and, not meaning to cause harm, said to him, "Why don't you go down to the courthouse and file a Baker Act?" So he did, and the judge granted it. And the next thing you knew, two officers were down there, and they handcuffed his wife and took her down to a facility. And the wife called and said, "What the hell have you done? Get me the hell out of here." And he called me. He was 80 years old. He was hysterical, crying, because what he was really trying to do was to get her help. And what people don't seem to realize is that the Baker Act is not designed for treatment. It is not a treatment statute. And I get a lot of calls. I want to Baker Act my loved one. Why? Well, they need treatment. Then don't Baker Act them because they ain't getting any treatment. That's not what it's for. It's only for emergency situations. I mean, if you're telling me that something's critical, there's life and death, call 911. I mean, that's what it's for. When it's done right, it's a powerful life-saving tool. But too often people don't realize what it is. They think that they're going to get their loved one help, and all of a sudden they get sucked into Florida's mental health system and they can't get out. Not only can they not get out, they're cut off from the whole world, and the family can't get any information. And so, it's a problem. But those are just two of the examples. I've also had so many children, 5, 7, 8, minors, who said something silly in a chat room, or posted something silly on social media. I had one kid who wore a T-shirt to school that said something to the effect of, I don't know, let's shoot up all the schools, right? And somebody in the school said, "Oh, this is a threat. The kid wants to shoot up the school," and they had him Baker acted. Well, it turns out when we did a little research that the T-shirt was actually a fashion statement. There was a website online selling these T-shirts that said, "I know, let's go shoot up the school," and it was a fashion statement. He wasn't trying to harm anybody, but the schools, down here, especially after we had Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, they're like, any even potential threat, grab them. Let's get them Baker acted, get them out, and let the courts deal with it. And so we got a lot of children we were representing. Their parents call us and say, "We didn't know about this. We didn't consent." Well, guess what? They didn't need your consent. The state stepped in. They took your kid away. Your parental rights are terminated. When did that happen? About 2 hours ago, when the cops showed up and handcuffed your kid. Your rights are terminated. Done.
So
you want to get them back? I do. We better go to court, because otherwise they're going to get an order potentially to keep them for a significant period of time. We see a lot of crazy stuff with the Baker Act. And you can tell I'm passionate about this stuff because it means a lot to me, because it happened to me. I know what it feels like.
So what is a significant period of time?
Well, so if it's an involuntary, and believe it or not, we actually have a voluntary Baker Act here, but if it's involuntary, the initial detention period is up to 72 hours, if they do it right. And after that, the facility can petition to keep somebody potentially up to 6 months. Now, that doesn't happen a lot when we get involved. Normally we get them out. Our average release time is 1 to 2 days. I don't think I've ever had anybody kept longer than a couple of weeks, because there's always some way to come up with a less restrictive alternative if you're creative. But every once in a while, I get a call from somebody that says, "Oh, my loved one's in the state hospital. They got ordered, they've been ordered here for 6 months. What can I do?" That's a tough bell to unring. It can be done. But if you're only 2 weeks into a 6-month order placement, it's pretty much game over. Why didn't you call us beforehand? Well, we had the public defender. And look, one of my associates is a former public defender. I hired him specifically because he'd been with the PD's office. But when you got 25 cases on the docket, it's impossible to prepare for everything, as opposed to, I have one and I'm ready to go. And I have an expert and we're ready to challenge everything. And we've looked at the medical records and looked to see if procedurally things were complied with. And unfortunately, if you don't have the money for a private lawyer, you risk getting the short end of the stick on the Baker Act. And our courts are overwhelmed, so the judges just want to get these cases moved. You got due process. Let's go. Next case.
So they end up in a institution, and they could, if they're somebody who's poor, destitute, whatever, they somehow put themselves in the situation. Somehow somebody felt threatened. They call the police. The police drag them into court, and the judge says, "Okay, Baker Act, 3 months or whatever."
There's no judge here, Zane. Our law enforcement here in Florida are agents of both the state's criminal justice system and the mental health system. The police can detain you under either one of those. So they can either take you to the county jail, you've been arrested, or they can detain you under the Baker Act, and they take you to a secured, locked facility that's part of the mental health system. The only difference is in the criminal justice system, you would, if you couldn't post bond for some reason, or it was a non-bondable offense, right? You would get a first appearance within 24 hours, which means you get a judge, you get a lawyer. There's a determination of probable cause. What are reasonable conditions of release, right? If you get Baker Acted, you don't get any of that stuff, which is completely ass backwards. Think about it. You haven't done anything wrong and you don't get any due process. In fact, they're
Seems
saying you're a
crazy.
mental health crisis and you get no due process. That's nuts.
And so then, let's say you get the first 72 hours, can they just the mental institution can just petition to keep them there for
Up to 6 months, yeah. And actually, just by filing the petition, they can potentially buy themselves another 5 days. Why? Because the court has to conduct a hearing within 5 days of the petition being filed, and they only do these hearings. Typically, Baker Act hearings are only once a week. So yeah, I mean, they can buy more time just by filing it, even if they don't plan to go ahead. And I've seen it happen. So welcome to Florida.
and so the people who stay in the institution are people who have insurance, and those who don't are get is that correct, or can it be anybody?
I don't know if I would say that's a hard and fast rule. What I can tell you is if I filed 100 habeas petitions, 99.9% of those people would have some form of health insurance in all likelihood. If I filed 1,000 big habeas petitions, I bet you 998 of them would have health insurance of some form or
Okay,
another. How's that?
okay, you won't say it. How about I say it?
Well, I'm just telling you
Yeah,
that the health insurance
yeah.
is one of the reasons people get stuck. It's one of the reasons that medical records, you know, contain inaccurate information. It's why the psychiatrist is motivated to put words in someone's mouth or ask a question that's designed to elicit a response that could potentially result in the person being detained.
This is like
Isn't it?
just total news. I think to most people, this is total. You know, no one can even believe it. It sounds like something out of the place that's 90 miles offshore. You know, that the place that we say we want to take over.
Yeah. Sounds like Guantanamo Bay. But at least if you're in
Yeah.
Guantanamo, somebody knows you're there.
It's just unbelievable. So, okay, so let me take it from the other side. So, my daughter's 24. She's using fentanyl. She's refused every conversation, and she says she doesn't have a problem. At what point does a family have some sort of legal option to help her?
I think right after she says there's nothing wrong with me, and you know that she's in complete denial. If I mean, clearly there's a problem, right? I mean, it's not just like a one-time thing. The this normally evolves over time, and it's usually years, right? Where their life just slowly morphs into this different universe, right? They become aloof. They stop spending time with the family. They have brand new friends that they would never spend time with. Maybe you even found evidence in the house that they're using, right? Contraband. Maybe they've even admitted it to you. They're flunking out of school. They can't hold down a job. They're not bathing. Their eating habits have changed. I mean, even if you don't see the red flags, you know subconsciously something is wrong. You just have that feeling as a parent, right? And I tell every parent, first of all, I think parents should be nosy, know what's going on in your child's life, ask questions, and if they don't want to answer the question, then you already know something's probably right, probably not right. But I think once you realize there's a problem, you should say, listen, there's a problem here. Can we talk about it? And if they're like, well, there's nothing wrong with me, well, now you know there is a problem because their mind's been hijacked. Because when somebody has a behavioral health disease, because it's a disease of the mind, part of the disease is their inability to even recognize that there is a problem. And I tell
Right.
families, it's as if their brain had been hijacked. It looks like them, sounds like them, walks like them, but they are not running the show. They're not running the show, and they can't possibly make the decision to save themselves. That stuff, as a general rule, only happens in movies, right? Where the patient goes to bed for 4 days, wakes up in a cold sweat, and says, "Oh, I'm good to go." Right? That's silly stuff. It's movie stuff. That's not how it works, right? There's normally a whole pattern of conduct that goes on here, and once the person is clearly in the grips, the throes of a behavioral health issue, it's time for somebody to step in and make the decision. And if it's not the family, then it'll probably be the state through either the criminal justice system or our mental health system. And if that doesn't happen, then you might be You might have a dead child on your hands. And I hate to be blunt about this, Zane, but every year we lose at least one person. And that's not a
So,
fun
Mark,
call to make or receive.
so Mark, walk me through exactly what happens when a family calls you. What do the first 24 hours look like?
Okay, so now I actually have an intake department, so I'm not the one taking the initial phone call, but and I have three people in intake. So family calls and they go through our intake department, and they're not lawyers, but they are trained on this stuff as well as any lawyer you'll ever meet. And so what we do is we triage the case. They understand, even as non-lawyers, that we have to have evidence, right? I just know that this is happening is not going to get me through the courthouse doors. So it's about finding out what's been happening, how long, how do they know? Okay, what evidence do we really have? What has been tried, if anything? What's worked, right? What hasn't worked, and why didn't it work? Have they tried treatment and it hasn't worked, right? Maybe they bounced from half a dozen different treatment centers, and the family's like, well, treatment doesn't work. Well, it does if they stay long enough in the right place. I tried the Marchman Act, it doesn't work. Well, it does if you do it right and you enforce it. Okay, so it's about finding out what's really going on in the case. But let's say we have enough evidence, it's a great case for us, and the parents say, "Okay, let's do this." They pay the fees and costs. They sign the retainer agreement because every client gets a retainer that explains exactly what the scope of services are and what we're going to do. And then either me or my wife, who's my law partner, sign it. So if I say we're doing it, I sign my name to it. So then what happens? Well, then the case is going to get assigned to one of what we call a pod. A pod is an associate, a paralegal, and a law clerk assigned to the case, and that pod is going to stay on the case from cradle to grave. So the retainer's been signed, the fees have been paid, and now the paralegal assigned to the case is going to get on the phone with the family, and they're going to start drafting these petitions, these pleadings, and we file everything as an emergency because we're typically the last port of call, Zane, and things need to get done quickly. I mean, clients aren't hiring us on a Monday and the case doesn't get worked until Friday. If you hire me at noon on Friday, noon on Monday, I want to get this case filed. If it's a Marchman Act, I want to get it done by the end of the day. I would like to try and get an order by the end of the day, if not, certainly the following day. So it's all hands on deck, So it's a rapid moving process, and the team knows things move quickly. They have to. The Habeas petition's the same thing. I want that case filed within 3 or 4 hours of the client saying yes. We need to move quickly because people get transferred, they disappear, right? Not good things happen to people. So we move very, very quickly on these cases, on all of our cases, unless for some reason that there's not an emergency, but it's very rare that it's not an emergency.
Mark, how does somebody find out about you when they're like, you mentioned Oregon. How do people find out about what you do and that you could possibly help them? Because it would never occur to me, to help a drug addicted child to call this attorney in Florida. I think, what?
Yeah, that's true. And when I first started doing the work 10 years ago, Zane, nobody had ever heard of the Marchman Act, partly because the two lawyers that were using it kept it a closely guarded secret because they were making bucket loads of money and they didn't want to tell anybody. Shh, we're making too much money. Don't tell anybody about the Marchman Act. Well, see, I started making videos, and one of the lawyers tried to shut me down by registering the fictitious name to my website and started sending me threatening emails. I don't respond well to that, so I told them where to proverbially shove it. And needless to say, I still to this day do not have a good relationship with him. But after I kicked his ass around the courtroom a few times, he had a little more respect for me. But needless to say, so there's two ways typically people find me. Number one, we're very active in the behavioral health space. I go to a lot of conferences. I do CLEs. I speak to clinicians, and it may be just that's how they found me through the network. The other way, that we do, and I've been doing it since day one, is I put a lot of content out there on social media. I've got 1,000 videos on YouTube talking about this and all the other social media platforms. And sometimes they'll just find us online and they say, "Oh, I want to talk to the guy in the video." You can talk to the guy in the video, but you got to talk to intake first. Then you can talk to the guy in the video. So I'm a big believer that you have to give people the information so they can even decide if they want to have a phone call. Because as you correctly pointed out, somebody in Oregon or California or New York doesn't know, because their state does not have the laws that we have, that there's even an option, right, where they can get empowered and they can make the decision that their loved one can't make. Because in their state, they don't have these statutes. And they're like, well, what do? Well, in your state, there's nothing you can do. You're SOL. But in Florida, we can do something. You can go to court and I can get you the authority. And depending on how much control you want, how out of control things are, I can get you the authority so you can make the decision your loved one cannot make, which is to save their life. Because if they could do it, they'd have done it. So somebody
Right.
has to make that decision. And that's what makes Florida a wonderful place to come. And we have amazing treatment centers down here, a select few that are world class. So you take great treatment with the authority to keep somebody in a clinically appropriate facility. Now we're talking about recovery and what it looks like and how long it takes. And that's the key to getting great results. Getting somebody into treatment and keeping them there long enough in a facility that's clinically appropriate and being able to access things so you know what's actually going on.
So I had a quote in here from somebody. Let's see. Um, ah, I have so much stuff on you, Mark. I just go through this dossier.
That's good.
But this
Anything you want,
quote in
right?
here from somebody,
I'll sit here and chat with you for the next 2 hours if you want, Zane. This
somebody that
saving other
that
people's
said that
family saved me. Do you understand why I'm passionate about this? This work saved me. It saved me. I was lost. That's the
and
key
now
to
you
being
got
a,
purpose.
by the way. Find a bunch of people that need your help and go and help them. And guess what? If you
So
do it well enough, somebody will pay you to keep doing it.
there was some quote in here that I found. Oh, I sincerely believe my son is alive today due to the Marchman Act. This is a mother in North Carolina sent her son to Florida rehab. And then the morning after he arrived, she received a call. He was saying leaving, and she called Mark. That's you, crying. Spent hours weighing the decision, then filed the Marchman Act. Her son relapsed, left the facility before the order expired, and you got her through a second time. And she says her son is alive today because of your work.
Isn't that
That's
what it's about?
remarkable. So, can my loved one fight the Marchman Act petition? Can they get a lawyer and push back against us?
Yeah. Yeah. And, as a general rule, what happens is the court will appoint counsel, but a lot of the time somebody wants a private lawyer. And I'm probably the only lawyer out there that will take a respondent case, much to the chagrin of a lot of people in the behavioral health space who think that, somebody who's on the receiving end of this doesn't deserve a good lawyer and due process. I am a lawyer and I'll do what's right. Now, if I'm representing somebody, and we just took on a respondent case today that clearly has an issue, then I take that responsibility seriously and I will counsel the client. Listen, we're gonna fight for you. We're gonna make sure that your rights are protected, but you have a problem here. And if you don't address this, something tragic is going to happen to you. And by the way, even if we win this case, your family can redo this. They can go right back into the courtroom next week and file another case. So let's have that conversation about getting you help. And sometimes that's a great way to resolve it. And sometimes people who are being Marchman acted, what they really want is they want to be heard because they feel like they're being railroaded. So sometimes we can resolve the case and get the person to treatment and give them great counsel, but sometimes we can't. And sometimes the Marchman Act is being used as a sword instead of a shield, where somebody's just using it to really do somebody some damage. And in those cases, I'm happy to represent the respondent because that's not what we're here to do. We're here to help people. We're here to serve. And if I think that a family's
So,
trying to do this, even if I'm their lawyer, if I think they're doing this to hurt somebody, I will fire the client. We're not here to do that.
so Mark, what does it actually cost to hire you? Is there a version of this process where a family can attempt this on their own if they don't have the money, or how does I'm sure you don't have one size fits all. There's no such thing in law, but how much does it cost to I have a son or daughter or something that I would do whatever to save them, but I don't know how.
Yeah, I mean, so we take an initial $7,500 retainer and we bill hourly against it. We also offer financing. There's a couple of different options we have. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if a family wants to go down to the courthouse and file their own, pro se Marchman Act, they can. Do I think it's a good idea? Probably not, because if you can muddle your way through it, um, let's say you get yourself into court, and it can be done. I've seen it done, and your loved one gets a lawyer, who's going to be appointed to represent them, who's very skilled in handling these cases. I mean, what's going to happen? You're probably going to lose that case. Now you're back to square one. So, I get it. I think one of the sort of inequities in the system is that there is no sort of legal aid for people who want to be able to file these things. Um, I think that's not right, but it is what it is. So,
So here I got some rapid fire. We'll just change it up just a little bit. So you teach Krav Maga. What does that
I,
have in common with being an attorney?
well, I did for a little while. I did for 20 years, but I've had now on my third surgery to repair my body. What is that? Well, I'll tell you what it does is, and I tell my wife this, it means I don't walk away from a fight. That's what it means. It means I'm trained to
Okay,
fight.
you grew up in the UK and ended up prosecuting felons in Palm Beach County. What's the most American thing about your life now?
Oh, I'm a big college football fan. I did my undergrad at the University of Michigan.
Oh, no kidding.
My
I'm
wife
going to
ran
say
track
no.
in Miami, so we're a college football, crazy family.
Oh, all right. So if you could change one thing about how Florida's mental health laws actually work, what would it be?
I think that we would build in a first appearance like we do in criminal cases. When somebody gets Baker Acted, they would get an immediate hearing within 24 hours in front of a judge to determine the
Mhm.
legality of their detention and also to appoint them counsel. I think that is what is needed to fix it. Is a first
So
appearance.
how do you fix that? Are you
You need
a
an act of
part-time
you
lobbyist too?
need our legislature to go fix it and then send it to Governor DeSantis and let him sign off on it. That's the big problem.
Um, what's the one call you get most often at midnight on a Friday?
Probably somebody who's been Baker acted illegally.
Hmm. Tell me about a family that was completely out of options. What was the situation and what happened?
Yeah, so when we first started doing this work in 16, the bulk of our cases were sort of alcohol, recreational drug type cases. But we had a big shift. Number one, we had COVID, but two, we legalized marijuana here in Florida. And that has caused a massive shift. Out the bulk of our cases now we're putting people into treatment are mental health driven cases fueled by this new marijuana, and we see lots of them. And one of those cases was a family that mom and dad were both doctors. They were wonderful, warm people. They clearly loved their son. He was in his, I think, late 20s, early 30s. The kid was a genius. I mean, if you gave him $1,000 on a Monday, by Friday he'd have $100,000. I mean, he was a whiz with the market. But he started using marijuana, and it just sent him into psychosis, and he was just living in another universe. And we ended up having to do a Marchman Act and a guardianship. It's been, I think, 7, 8 months now, and he's finally turning the corner. But it's been a long road for the parents, and these cases are very challenging, and it just takes time for someone to get well. So I mean, we get those cases, but it takes time. Recovery is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not do 30 days and you're done. I tell every family this is a year-long journey. You don't need me for the year, but they have to work a program for the next year. And clinically, what that looks like is to be determined. But you're going to need me to get it going. I'm the catalyst.
So you've worked with thousands of families over 9 years. Is there a moment that still stays with you?
I had one dad who had an adopted daughter, and he had her since she was an infant. And God, he had her. He spent a small. I mean, he must have Marchman acted this girl 3 or 4 times. And he was. I think he was a widow too. And one time she walked out of treatment, and she overdosed and she died.
Hmm.
And he was such a nice guy. He called me and said she's dead. And that was a tough call. I
Yeah.
remember that one because I just remember being so determined to try and save her. And she was in and out of treatment. I mean, and and look, when I first started doing this work, saying I said, I'm going to save everybody. That unfortunately, it was very naive on my part. It's not possible to save everybody. We can save a lot of people, but not everybody. And she was one we couldn't save. And that was a tough call. He was just such a gentleman. And he was so desperate to save his only child. And it just didn't work out.
What's the biggest mistake families make before they ever call an attorney? The thing that blows up the case before it starts.
Thinking they can, thinking that if they ignore it, it'll get better. It's a
Right.
disease, and left untreated, it just is going to get worse. That's a fact.
So there's also a big belief out there that you can't force someone into recovery. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think that really is it's a matter of perspective. And if I'm saying, well, I don't want to force them into treatment. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. I want you to make the decision for them. And there's a difference. Okay. We're not, first of all, when you say, I don't want to force them, that person over there is not them. Okay. That's not little Johnny or little Jane. It looks like little Johnny or little Jane. It sounds like them. It walks like them, but that ain't them. Little Johnny and little Jane had their mind hijacked sometime in the past, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, right? So when you say I'm not forcing them, that person you're looking at, that is not them. That the them is gone for now. Okay. So if they're gone, somebody over here who's still here has to make the decision to save them and get them into treatment. So it really is perspective. And when you understand, number one, they're not running the show because their mind was hijacked. And number two, because it's a disease, it's not going to want to go to treatment because that is the sort of that's the antidote. So the disease does not want to go into treatment because it's the end of the disease potentially. And it's the disease that's running the show. So this idea that we're forcing somebody, I just don't agree with it. What we're really trying to do is empower the family, right? So that they can make the decision. Because if you don't make it, then the consequences can be catastrophic. Like that dad. Now, he made the decision, but unfortunately, things didn't work out. And I wish I could tell you I can make you a guarantee that I'll definitely save your loved one. But the statistics show that if you can keep somebody in recovery, Zane, for 1 year, just 1 year, there's a 70% chance that they stay in recovery for the rest of their life. And there's an 83% chance if you get them to 5 years. So that first year is where everything is where the magic really happens. It's where the miracle happens. So getting them to 1 year is key and critical.
So if a lot of families will think that, if I file this legal action against my son or my daughter or my wife, or it's going to destroy a relationship forever. What really happens?
Yeah, that is a great question, Zane. A lot of the time, the families will say to me, "Well, he's going to be mad at me." Well, okay, yes. If you believe that's still him or her, then yes, they're going to be a little bit mad with you. You should expect that. It's not unusual. But sometime between now and the next 3 months, maybe a little bit longer, the light bulb's going to go on. And they're going to start to come back. And it's going to take a little time. And when that starts to happen and your loved one actually comes back, that anger is going to disappear. And at some point they're going to thank you for saving them. But they're not capable of doing that right now. And by the way, you should be working on you as well. See, a good treatment center is going to have a family program that the family has to do. Because whether the family knows it or not, they've been traumatized by this. They've been living in chaos for a long time. And so it's key and critical for a family to do their own work. But yeah, their loved one being mad at them, yeah, it's very possible. So what? We're going to save them. And at some point, they're going to thank you. But I'm going to tell you, if you don't save them and something tragic happens, you'll never forgive yourself.
So what do you think the addiction crisis looks like now in America? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And then I have a follow up to that too.
I think it's getting worse. I think that we are. I think if we're not already in it, I think we're in a mental health crisis. There's 40 states, I think it is now, that have legalized marijuana in one shape or form or another. We have a whole generation of people that are suffering from mental illness because of this new legalized marijuana and kratom and these other sort of man-made synthetic opioids that are out there and available and not yet illegal. So I think it's only getting worse. I'll share one other thing with you as well, Zane. I was a prosecutor for 5 years. I had a colleague of mine that only left the office 2 years ago, and we interned together in '93. He was there for 30 years. And I said to him, Craig, I said, when we were prosecutors, we used to prosecute DUIs all the time. I would imagine now with Uber and all these first time programs, it's better, right? Not so many DUIs. He said, no, there's more people driving drunk and high on the roads here in South Florida than ever before. It's worse than ever. So it's even more dangerous to be on the road at night. We have Uber, we have all this education. I mean, and yet there is more, right? I mean, how hard is it to pick up the phone and just call Uber and say, and come and get me? or whatever it is. And yet more people are driving drunk and high than ever before. So I just think it's worse, and I don't think COVID helped with that. But yeah, I think I'm going to be busy for a long time,
So
and
what
we
do you think?
people
I
too.
mean, what is Mark? What do you think that? I mean, there. What are some of the solutions maybe that could at least get us going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think the big one, Zane, is making quality treatment available to everybody. I mean, if you have good health insurance or you have financial resources, you can access world-class treatment. If you don't, that's a problem, right? I mean, we have county facilities here in Palm Beach County. They're good, but they're overwhelmed. And so getting a bed is not so easy. And they're just trying to get people in and get them out. And it's a shame because they provide quality treatment and the people that work there really care about helping people, but the resources are limited. And so at some point we have to throw some money at this. I know RFK Jr. was talking about it, that they're going to start putting money into the mental health systems, but I think that brings its own problems. I mean, I don't want to get political, but we've seen what's happened in Minnesota and now in California. And anytime the government gets a big wad of money and throws it at people, there's going to be others out there who are going to use it as an excuse to steal, which means the people that really need it aren't going to get it. And that's a shame. But we do have to make quality treatment available to everybody. And then we can start to treat because we're not going to be banning marijuana. And even if we did, like we have done in the past, it's not going to solve the problem. We tried that with alcohol, it didn't work. So quality treatment is the key here for both substance use and mental illness. And then we can start to, make a dent in the universe, the proverbial universe, as it were. But until that happens, it's just going to get worse.
So do you think that those two things, like, so I look at Los Angeles as probably the epicenter of the worst kind of homeless. I mean, and this has happened over the last 10 years. I mean, it's like a hellhole down there.
Yeah,
You
no,
know, eh, Parts of San Francisco are just as bad, but not as bad as the overall. I mean, Los Angeles is just the epicenter. So do you think that most of those people are either drug addicted or alcohol, or either drug addicted or mentally ill or both, or would you say like 90? What percentage of those are the underlying issue is drug addiction versus mental illness?
yeah. I mean, I don't know the statistics as we sit here, Zane. I'm willing to bet that applies to a large part of the people that are down there. But I think there's also a large part of the people down there who just fell on hard times. They lost a job. They were over leveraged, and they just need a helping hand to get back on their feet. I mean, whatever it is, I think one of the things that bothers me most, Zane, is in a country as wealthy as this, that we don't have the resources to take care of people, I think is an absolute disgrace. And that applies especially to veterans. My father-in-law is a veteran. We do not take care of our people that come back that are in the military, especially after the fact. And I've represented a number of veterans who got Baker acted at the VA. So I simply don't believe in a country like America, and I don't want to get political, that we don't have the resources or the will to take care of people that either have a behavioral health issue or just fell on hard times. I just don't believe it. And so we got to do better than that. We are better than that, and we should be.
So if somebody's watching this right now and says, "Oh, that Mark Astor, he sounds like I need to get in touch with him," what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably on our main website, Zane, which is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com, or just Google my name. I mean, I'm all over social media. You should have a problem finding me.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It was really an interesting and enlightening topic for me anyway. I think for most people who are going to listen, will be surprised at some of the information too.
Thank you for having me, Zane.